a sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Well, I'm really pleased today to welcome my guest. He is a stand-up comedian, does something else as well. We'll get into that. From Toronto, Ontario, Kyle Brownrigg. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Oh, thanks, Nancy, for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure for sure. I'm just curious when you started doing stand-up.
I started in 2013 in Ottawa. I'm originally from Ottawa, East End, very sort of French suburb of Ontario. And I started in 2013 at Absolute Comedy. There was an open mic night. And to be honest with you, I really had no interest at all in doing stand-up comedy. It never occurred to me. I mean, you know, coming from Ottawa, it's a government town. Being an artist for a living, that's not really something that people put on the table as an option. I mean, especially in high school, you know what I'm saying? It's a very unconventional way of making a living. And to me, I always say this is just it. It seems so stupid now, but at the time, I thought that to be a stand-up comedian, you had to be a famous movie star.
Yeah, right.
Like Robin Williams. Like I just thought that's the only way. It never occurred to me that there were so many unfamous stand-up comedians, right? And I was like, oh my God, I should be one too. And so my friends were just like, you should try it, because I used to work in an art gallery in downtown Ottawa that's since closed called Canteen, and there were these two open mic comics that were coming through, Bev Ellis and Julie Kim. Julie Kim is quite successful now. You should check her out. She's very, very lovely, very funny, and she's been quite successful. And they just came in and said, we're doing a stand-up comedy show, you should come. And I just thought, well, you're not famous. Like, who are you? You know? And then it just kind of occurred to me, like, anybody can do stand-up. And then that's kind of how I got into it. My friends signed me up, and then the rest is history.
Very good. So do you have a particular style, or, you know, sometimes, like, I did stand-up, but I couldn't tell you what kind of style I did. It just whatever.
You know, I mean, that's so true, right? It's like the way that we approach stand-up in terms of like style, it's so personal that I guess you don't really think of it like a style necessarily. I would say I do a lot of misdirections, a lot of one-liners. I don't do a lot of like, what's the deal with fill in the blank? You know, I don't really do a lot of bits exactly. I find it tends to be sort of self-empowerment, self-deprecatory type of humor. And I use traumatic experiences in my life to sort of make light of things and maybe make it a little bit easier for somebody else to maybe deal with. Not that I'm Oprah, but I'm just saying, like, I try to just mostly talk about my life and do a lot of one-liners. If I had to say there was one distinct thing that I do that might be a little bit different, I find comedy now is very ranty and very angry, very they pick a topic and they kind of rant on it, and people love that, and it has its place. I'm more of a classic setup punch kind of person. So for me, it kind of takes a long time to come up with like 10 minutes of material because I write shorter bits. But one thing I do pride myself on is that I actually have like classic punchlines, like an obvious setup and an obvious punchline, where I find a lot of people now tend to be more ranty and more storytelling. Not that there's anything wrong with that format, but I do pride myself in the amount of punchlines that I manage to get into my set.
Right. It's just different styles, right?
Different styles. That's right. Yeah,
for sure. Now, you mentioned Robin Williams. Did you have a favorite comedian or comedians that you listened to?
Yeah, actually, I would say that most of my favorite comedians are female, but I also love like just comedy. Like I just love comedians. If I had to pick like my favorites that are just like my go-to, it would be Sarah Silverman, I would say Maria Bamford is probably my number one. Amy Schumer, I love the style of Wendy Liebman. She was kind of a big influence of mine. Heidi Foss, Jim Gaffigan, John Mulaney. I could literally go on and on and on and on and on. But like, yeah, those are kind of like my main top 5, top 6.
Right. Yeah. And it's so subjective, right? Like one of the things that when you said like you that what was their deprivation, whatever word was, it's easier to do that. Like I can say, because I'm short. If I talked about short people in a negative way, people go, oh my God, it's so politically incorrect. But if I talk about myself being short, it's acceptable, right?
That's right. Yes. And sometimes I find you'll talk about something and somebody will try to police you on you talking about your experience. And that one, I always love being like, you have no idea what my relationship is with this topic. Like, how dare you? And you kind of get to have like a little bit of a moment that's kind of empowering. But it's interesting, you know, the way that stand-up comedy is fitting into society now, because before, when I started, Anthony Jeselnik and Amy Schumer were very popular. They were very, very controversial. Like the style of comedy in like 2013 was basically like an edgy joke was just blatant racism. And like, it would just be like, oh my God, I can't believe that this white person is saying that joke. It's so edgy. And that was very much the style. And I'll tell you, it quickly went out of fashion, you know, for good reason. But at the time, like, that's just how it was. Like, that's just how the comedy styles, you know, were. And so for me, I am always open to considering what I have said in the past and what I do say on stage and how that can affect others. I don't think that you should ever just go in and be like, fuck everybody. Oh, can I swear on this? Sorry. You know, just be like, oh, like, screw everybody. Like, I don't care what they think. It's like, that's kind of an old school mentality. We're learning that like words can affect others and can have an impact on people's lives and their mental health and stuff like that. So it is one thing to talk about your own experience, but sometimes you do kind of need to maybe consider how that might affect others or how that might affect the way that the audience views you. So there's a lot of consideration that you have to take into this job, especially in 2023.
And I think one of the things that I would tell to anybody starting out is know your audience, right?
It's hard knowing it, you know, it just depends. I find it's so interesting. I find it's easier if you've had a very, very difficult life. It's easier for you to find your audience because you're extremely relatable and people can relate to your struggle. Or if you were very much like that popular kid in high school and you're just kind of the cool kid and you've always been kind of the cool kid, it's easy finding your audience because you just have that natural thing that people, I think the hardest thing is people like me, where we were just kind of in between.
Okay.
I've always kind of just been like a middle of the road kind of person. Like when I was growing up, like my parents, we weren't rich, but like we weren't poor. I've never been like, you know, this super gorgeous cover model, but like, I'm also not like a gargoyle. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, I've always kind of just been like in the middle, like my whole life. And that I find is the trickiest part of finding an audience, because you have to be able to appeal to as many people as possible while kind of just being a little plain oatmeal. So I think that's the hardest challenge.
Well, one of the things for me, again, is like the newer young, especially the males, I find them, they say things more or less for shock value. But to me, being in the audience is they're talking to males. You know, and it's like, well, what about the rest of us here? I'm not enjoying this. If you watch it, we're not laughing, then you're not funny. This is my thought on it anyway. You know, I don't mean you're not funny, but to a certain group.
No, I understand completely what you're saying. I mean, stand-up comedy, I mean, especially when I started, or actually, I guess still is a boys' club. Yeah. It's always been a boys' club. It's changing a little bit, but it's still very much a boys' club. Anytime that any kind of minority act, LGBTQ, I mean, honestly, I would even throw female comic in there. It's like when you have a female comic succeeding, oh my God, like comments, the negative comments, the resentment of this woman's or minor or LGBTQ person, whatever, their success, it's like men. It's always straight men that have to have a comment, have an opinion about how they suck, about the only reason why they're getting it is because of a checkbox. And it's just like this fragile ego moment of the fact that they didn't get what they thought that they deserved and that somebody else is succeeding, and how could they? And they can't wrap their mind around the fact that not everything is for them. It's like they were brought up in a world, a straight white male world where everything caters towards them. And then in the last, I would say like 8 years, probably since about like 2017, so like 7 or 8 years, you know, it's like that conversation began to change, where people of color, LGBTQ people, female comics, we started being like, enough. We need more diversity on these lineups. We need better representation. And yeah, no, I've heard all the things that the men have to say, the straight men have to say. And it's honestly kind of depressing, but it just goes to show how fragile their egos are and how entitled they feel to everything. And it's oppression. It feels like oppression to people. This kind of change feels like oppression to people who have been in the receiving end of privilege for so long. Yeah.
And the sad thing is there's room for everybody. This is my thought anyway, right? Be generous. Now, I want to change the topic if you don't mind. I want to talk about the fact that you're a freelance graphic designer. I'm reading on your Facebook page here. You're an illustrator, right? So, yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I don't do that anymore. It is on my Facebook, though. I should probably take that down. But that actually is what my education is in. I went to university for illustration because I thought that was a slam dunk, which is why I'm a comedian. And yeah, I used to be an illustrator. I used to illustrate for like the Globe and Mail, the National Post. All freelance. But I ended up moving on from that career choice because I was, if this is even possible, I was making less money in illustration than I was in comedy. So I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I still design some comedy albums. I've done Martha Chavez comedy album, Kate Davis's comedy album. Oh my God, Adrian Kronk's comedy album, my comedy album. I have designed and drawn like all of them and stuff like that. But I actually, I should remove that from my face. It's false advertising. Yeah, I don't do that anymore. I moved on from that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So other than comedy, what else are you doing?
This is all I do for a living. I'm a full-time stand-up comedian. I don't have a day job.
Well, that is fantastic because I know it's not easy. I know that for a fact, right?
No, I mean, yeah, I'll tell you, I spent my entire 20s just working the crappiest jobs and sacrificing so much, living in a basement, barely being able to afford rent, barely being able to pay my bills, just so that I could do this as a career. And I was in the trenches for a long, long time. It probably wasn't until July 2019 when I was at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival and I got my first royalties paycheck for my first comedy album. And I remember being like, okay, like I've made it. Like I'm at Just for Laughs. I got my first check. This is it. But it took a long time and a lot of sacrifices to get there for sure.
Now, I imagine, or I don't know, I shouldn't say that, but I would think that at times you've had the hecklers in your audience.
Yes and no. I'm usually pretty good. I don't mind. I don't like to advertise this, but I don't mind hecklers. But I have had hecklers. There was one where it was Mother's Day on a Sunday in Ottawa, and I was headlining the show, and there was only like 8 people in the audience because it's Mother's Day. Who's going to a comedy show, right? And 2 of my aunts that have never seen me do stand-up comedy come to this show. I'm like, of course, of course, this is the show that you come to. And the show was kind of going okay. It was a little painful, obviously. It's this big club, but there's only like 8 people there. They should have called it, but like yucks, they're so cheap they wouldn't cancel anything like that. And we were going around and, you kind of have to get to know the audience a little bit because it's so small. And you're like, oh, like, where are you from? Oh, you guys together. Nice. No. And then I got to this one guy and he was with this other man. And I said, oh, are you two together? And keep in mind, like, I'm gay. Like, I'm just asking a harmlessly innocent question.
Yeah.
And this question upset him so much. He started screaming at me. He was like, you're not funny. You're never going to make it. You should not move to Toronto to do comedy. You're the worst comedian I've ever seen. And I was just so shocked at because I just simply asked, are you two together? And then he got up, he was yelling at me. And then at the end of the show, he just disappeared because I think he was so embarrassed or something like that. Personally, I think that he obviously was with this man and he is from a different generation. So he probably was terribly embarrassed by something like that. I don't know. But that was the only time that my aunts had ever seen me perform. And I was just absolutely mortified. Yeah.
I've had some strange experiences. I'm just wondering if you had the same. Like one time, I can't remember where I was. I performed mostly with a niece of mine. We had our own stage time, but we'd walk on at different times and we'd have fun. But sometimes we'd have, like, it'd be in a restaurant or something where the waitress would talk really loud to one of the patrons while we're doing our comedy. And it's like,
yeah,
competing. I don't want your job. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, I hate that so much when the waitress or the waiter is like, I'm sorry, what? I can't hear you over the comedian on stage, which is why we're all here for. Yeah, I know. It's super annoying.
It's almost like they think, they have to compete with us. And it's like, no. If I want to be a waitress, like I would have been a waitress, not a comedian.
Well, it's amazing to me how very few people have volume control. Like my boyfriend has the worst volume control. Like he's either extremely quiet and you can't hear him, or he's so loud you're like, why are you yelling? It's incredible to me. Yeah, I find I don't get it, but no, that's such a thing at all comedy clubs across America. It's not just one comedy club or venue. There's always that one server that's so loud. Yeah.
Yeah. Or walking. There's a place I'm in Chilliwack, British Columbia, and there was a place that I used to have to stand up all the time, and I just wasn't performing at this time, but there's comedians up on stage and people walking back and forth, like just to go out for a smoke, probably smoke a joint or something, and I'm thinking, sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now I got into improv. Has that something you've done or considered doing?
I would say when you get heckled, that's the closest thing I'll ever do to improv. You got to think on your feet. You got to be able to respond to it. But no, improv was never really my journey. Not that it doesn't have its own value. Yeah. Improv is a really good skill to have. I just find that most people are terrible at it. So I can't watch improv. It makes me sad. It makes me very sad. But when you find good improv, it's the most amazing thing in the world. It's just very rare.
Yeah. Actually, I think because I got older, like I started comedy when I was in my 50s, so everything was late. So I was in my 60s when I did improv. I didn't have to remember lines anymore. All I had to do was remember the rules of that particular game we were playing. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's why I found it easier. Anyway, enough about that's about me. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you to hire you, how would they do that?
Well, I am currently represented by Williams Hirsch Management. You just Google Williams Hirsch. Just Google it. We're very easy to find, or you can look me up on social media. I'm Kyle Brownrigg on absolutely every single platform, and I have links to my booking agent. So I'm very easy to find and I'm very easy to book. Okay.
I see that I'm looking at contact info with www site. Is that still valid?
Just you can even check my website, www.kylebrownrigg.com. I'm literally the easiest person in the world to get in contact with.
Yeah, just because I want to post, under when I do the rendering, we put it on your name. I want to put with some place it's easiest for people to just click on and contact you that way. So it's always great to be able to promote somebody. Now,
appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, well, for sure. Well, this is what it's all about for me, anyway. What I want to know is are there particular places where you get hired, or do you have your favorite type of venue?
Favorite type of venue is a packed basement. Those are really the best comedy shows. Low ceilings. The more of a dump the place is, the better it seems to be for comedy because everybody just has low expectations, I think. And some of the best shows I've ever done in my life have been to, it's always been in like a gross, dark, dingy basement. Those are definitely my favorite venues. I love obviously performing in large theaters. I've done a lot of shows like that in my past. Haven't really done any one of those too recently. Well, that's not true, actually. I guess we did Cracking Up the Capitol in Ottawa at the Algonquin Theater, and we did some, but these were much smaller shows, so it's not quite the same thing. But no, nothing beats a packed, gross basement. that is really the cornerstone of my career.
That's pretty cool. Now, do you only perform in Ottawa or in Ontario, or do you go out of the province and perform as well?
I live in Toronto. I perform. It's funny. I moved to Toronto to do stand-up, but you don't really work in Toronto. It's like you move to Toronto to establish yourself as a comic, but you work everywhere else in the country. Like I just did the Halifax Comedy Festival. I just did a week in Ottawa at Absolute Comedy. I really just tour. It's basically just like wherever in Canada they're hiring me, like that's where I go. I don't really have like one place where I hang up my hat exactly. But I'm constantly performing in Toronto. But Toronto is more of like it's like a gym. It's like you're working on material to bring out on the road. Like when I'm on the road, like you're not going to catch me seeing do like doing like a brand new untested bit. That's kind of more what Toronto is for in my opinion.
Right. Well, this has been very interesting. I appreciate you coming on and talking with me about this.
Of course, anytime. Thank you for asking me, Nancy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime for me too. So just hold on. I'm just going to say goodbye to the audience. And so you've been listening to Kyle Brownrigg, sorry. I'm going to share his contact information. So if you want to go listen to him or find out where he's performing, he'll be able to give you that information. Thanks for watching the show. I hope you continue to do so, and share is nice. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Peace out.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.